All right, so we'll continue. Siman Tzaddik Aleph Hilchos Basar בחלב. We began to discuss Sif Hey. It's a long Sif, and I think it would be a good idea to review Sif Hey, even though we didn't complete the entire Sif. So we'll review the main points and then hopefully finish the Sif. Towards the end of Tzaddik Aleph, the Mechaber brings up Melicha. Even though Hilchos Melicha are mentioned in Samech Tas and Ayin, and there's some Hilchos Melicha in Taaruvot, there's obviously some concern about Melicha and Basar בחלב, because after all, we're talking about a form of heat. As the Chachamim tell us, Meliach is keroteach. It's just a fact. It does have some koach. The question is, how much koach does it have? The consensus is that at least kedei klipa. Without getting into yet kochush and shomen, without speaking yet about the togover, just the koach itself of Melicha is strong enough to be mavliya. In other words, that which is the salty one has the koach to be mavliya in the unsalted one, kedei klipa, which is good news. If it's only kedei klipa, I don't have to worry too much about it. There can be concerns, of course, of Melicha. Somebody, for example, put a whole bunch of meat on the table. Well, not on the table. You can't salt on the flat table, but on a platform where it's slanting, because the blood has to flow, right? Whenever you do Melicha, you have to have it in such a position where the blood can flow. The meat cannot sit in its own blood. Yeah, otherwise it's a problem of kavush, too, in its own tzir and dam. So assuming that everything is okay, the meat is salted in such a platform, a kli menukav, a kli, in other words, a vessel, a container which is perforated, I guess, right? So the blood can flow. And you have, all of a sudden you realize, well, wait a minute, they forgot to do nikur of the chelev on this piece of meat. You know, before you salt the meat, after you slaughtered the cow, and you did the bdika to see that the lungs are kosher, you rinsed out the dam ba'in. The dam ba'in is, of course, the blood that's sitting on the meat. You rinsed it. Before you go ahead and prepare the meat for salting, there is nikur. Nikur is a very important process which involves removing the chelev and the vridim that contain blood vessels, the veins.
Now the nikur is done on a cow or?
Yeah, not the whole cow needs nikur, because wherever you have chelev is also min Torah, right? You got to remove the chelev. There's certain parts of the cow, of the not necessarily the cow, the sheep, the goat, not the chaya. If you shechted a gazelle, the chelev is mutter, and of course birds don't have chelev. So you're only concerned with the small feed animals, sheep and goats, and bulls, cows, steers, and so forth. What's interesting is that on the one hand, with chayas and birds, you don't have a problem of chelev, but you have the mitzvah of kisui adam, right, which you don't have by behema, sheep and goats. But there you have to be concerned with the chelev. And some parts of the animal are full of chelev. That's discussed in the various halachas that pertain. The head of a sheep. You want to have lamb. Yeah, but lamb could be very, cumbersome when it comes to the nikur, depending what parts you want to have, because the chelev is only in certain parts, whereas the chelev, you want to have the tail, the bull's tail, the tail of a bull. Have you ever had the tail?
Not consciously.
Yeah, it's very tasty. I don't know if they have it here routinely, but you can order it. But it has chelev. You have to remove it, the chelev, before you can have it. So certain parts have chelev. And that's a very important part, and not everybody knows how to be menaker, to remove. And especially if you're going to have the hindquarters, you've got to be menaker, the gid hanashe, the sciatic nerve, which the Ashkenazim, for the most part, don't do.
Yes, they don't even bother
with it. Yeah. So that's, after you've done the nik of the chelev and the vridim, then you soak the meat, after you've cut it up in manageable pieces, you soak it to soften it so that the salt will work on it, to draw out the blood. So imagine if you have here a piece of meat that was not, without the nikur of the chelev, and you salted it. You have a big problem in that piece, and you may have potential problem with pieces that are adjacent, touching it.
So with respect to Meliach keroteach also?
Yes, sure. It's a big problem if you've done Melicha to a meat with the chelev on it. If you get to that's one of the problems that can happen. There's other problems. Melicha has to be done right away. You can't just put away the meat unless you soak it in water. I mean, every so often, freeze it. Otherwise, after a while, a number of days, the Melicha won't work to draw out the blood. Then, Melicha won't work. I mean, Sli, roasting is another method, of course, of taking out the blood. If you're in a place where there is no salt, that's the only method you could use to get the blood out. You cannot have the meat with the blood. Unless, of course, you were to eat it raw. And Elon, you know the reason for that.
Of course, because it's not the blood that's the problem of the body.
Exactly. It's only the dama porosh, when it moves, and it moves through the cooking process. Yeah. Yeah. So technically, if you ate it raw, if you like raw meat, there was no Easter. Anyway, you talk about dam, there's a difference between dam hanefesh, of
How about
course.
smoking it if you smoke cooking?
Yeah,
Is it like sleep?
it's more similar. It's a certain type of heat. It's more like sleep.
I'm talking with
It's not
respect to the
bishul.
dam.
Not bishul. Yeah.
With respect to the blood.
well,
Do you have a problem eating something that had nothing unstable?
Well, the smoking doesn't remove all the blood, I don't believe.
So it's not as effective.
No, not as
Then
effective.
how about dam haparosh? You don't have a problem with dam cooking?
You may have, yeah, because that's what even Melicha does that. Melicha can accomplish dam
Well,
porosh.
that's just about the
Right.
salt.
As it's drawing out, it is porosh.
Right, of course.
Of course, right?
Well, not.
Exactly. So smoking also, perhaps. So anyway, with dam, by the way, just a little point about dam. The dam that the Torah asks is called the dam hanefesh. The dam that squirts out after the animal is slaughtered, as it's coming out, that shower of blood, if you've ever seen it. Dam hanefesh, of this animal's spirit that leaves the animal.
That's what you're not allowed to do.
That's what you cannot from the Torah. Of course, we don't eat any dam, the Rabbanan.
Now, dam haparosh is the Rabbi
Rabbanan. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And
The only one that is the Raita is the
the
Dam
Dam
HaNefesh. Dam HaNefesh is the one that is.
And Rashi, if I recall, she says that they used to know how to cook
Yeah.
without salt. The blood would sealed.
Sealed.
Place.
Yeah, sealed. Yes, there are things like that, right?
With a pressure
You went through
cooker?
Hilchos Melicha already? You went through a little
it
bit?
was
Part of the Gemara.
Basar
Part of the Basar B'Cholov too. Okay, yeah. That's,
and the first time.
yeah. All right, anyway, so Melicha is interesting, even though today we don't do it, so much. It's done for us. It's good to know. So Meliach kiroteach, the rabbis tell us, it has the power of roteach. Roteach means boil, it means cook, it means roasted. What kind of roteach? So they tell us it's roteach, it's tzli, it's not bishul. It's more similar to tzli, roasting, which means that it will not affect, supposedly, the entire piece. In other words, if I have something which is treif, and it's being salted together with other things, whether it's the treif because it's a chaylev, or it's treif because it's a nevela, a treif piece of, right? Regardless, it's going to be mavliya into the kosher, into the heter, right? And if it's sliz keroteach, I want to know how much. So it's like tzli, but it's not like bishul, which means that it won't go so far. Now tzli goes kedei netila, right? So meliach is a little bit less than the kedei netila. In other words, a little bit less than tzli. So even though we say it's like roteach the tzli, we don't mean that it's also kedei netila, just like tzli. We mean it's closer to tzli than it is bishul, but it's a little bit less than tzli. Just a little bit less than tzli, so klipa is enough. Okay. If that's the case, what we need to know is under what are the circumstances, what's the criteria exactly that's necessary for the heter, or the tofel, that which is unsalted, to become asur. Does it depend on how much salt there was? Okay, meliach, salt means, but how much? What if I just put a little bit of salt? Will that make it a teach? Right? Under what condition will this meliach be a teach? Well, on that we have a little bit of a machloket. So we discussed the machloket, even though, Ilan, you pointed out correctly that there are other opinions, and that's Tosfot. But I want to stick to just Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam to make it simpler, because it's basically two opinions. You have a Rashi that seems to be saying that when something is salted and it becomes roteach, it's something that is salted so much that it's not tasty. You wouldn't eat it this way. And it appears to be that in Maseches Chulin, where he's a little bit more descriptive of why would somebody salt it that much, he's saying, like the people who salted to take it on a trip. Well, that's for sure not edible the way it is. But perhaps it doesn't have to be that much. to make something salty and unedible, all you need is enough salt, the amount that is used to draw blood out of the piece of meat, which is less than the amount Rashi says, supposedly. Even though Rashi may seem to agree with that from another Gemara. Because Rabbeinu Tam says that's, from what all that we know, he has proof that if it was salty just enough to draw out the blood, that makes it roteach. So who's the one that's machmir? Rabbeinu Tam. Because Rashi says, in order for this to be salty and to be a problem, it would have to be so salty as like the people who salt things to preserve them and to take them on a trip. Whereas Rabbeinu Tam says, no, even if you have salt enough to draw the blood out, which is, by the way, not that much, even though lechatchila you should cover all the sides, you sprinkle it. I mean, you basically don't cover it layer upon layer with salt. Yeah, you put a nice amount of salt, otherwise it won't do its job. You do it inside and outside if there is an inside cavity. So you do it all over. But that is not as much salt as the Rashi in Chulin says that it would be preserved, which appears to be a lot more salt. Anyway, all right, most poskim hold like Rabbeinu Tam. So we'll leave it at that. That once something has become so salty, is enough salt, like the amount of salt used to draw out blood, it's called Meliach Keroteach. The Ramah does say that the Halacha lemaisa, we are going to be machmir. The Mechaber doesn't say that, but the Ramah is going to say that we are going to be machmir, that even if it's Meliach that is used for tzli, which is even a lesser amount altogether, a piece of meat that was salted, a piece of liver. Well, either way, a liver, when you roast liver, you salt it a little bit. That's the minhag. Even though the fire will draw it out, the minhag is to salt it a little bit. Not as much as you salt meat, but a little bit. So the Ramah uses that amount to tell us that even if the piece of meat does not have that much salt to draw out all its blood, there was that kind of amount, but it does have quite a bit of salt to the extent that it resembles a piece of liver that is being salted. In other words, it has just a little bit of salt. Not a little bit, but was enough that would qualify it for tzli, for the liver for tzli. It says that would be also meliach keroteach. So the Ramah is machmir even more. He says if you went ahead and had something very, very salty, but it was not that much salt like to draw out blood, but it was quite a bit of salt, you have to be careful with it. Right, because you're right. Right, because the Pashut Halacha is it's so salty that the eno nechal machmat molcho. But that's according to the Ramah, we would, just like the Ramah is machmir in various other situations because we're not be'im. He uses that several times. We're not be'im bin kochosh l'shomen, as an example. We don't know. And he'll say too here, we're not, how are you going to tell? How much salt does he have? He just says if there's a little bit of salt, enough that it's like meliach letzli, it's already going to cause a problem. Obviously, I think Rabbi Elyahu Kin says this. I think so. I'm relying on memory now. That if you have a situation like this, you have only meliach letzli, not as much salt, and you're not sure if this is kochosh or shomen, we're not going to be machmer both chumras. You hear along? To say two chumras now we won't say, and I think Rabbi Elyahu Kin says that agabe this. So even though the Ramah is machmer here, and he's machmer here, he's machmer all over the place for certain things. He actually has one kula over here. He only says behefse meruba, but still there's a kula here. But Rabbi Elyahu Kin, I believe, says that you don't say two chumras. One chumrah, yes, but not two. So if you're going to be machmer, you're going to be machmer kedei klipa, because after all, it could be that it's kochush, and even if it's shaman, who says it was so salty, it was just not as much? Okay. How about the amount of time? The amount of time is a little tricky. The Mechaber appears to be saying that the amount of time is 18 minutes, of course, which is what he says in Hilchas Melicha is the amount of time it takes for salt to do its job, to draw out the blood. But that period of time of 18 minutes, kihiluch mil, he says, only begins to take effect after it has transpired. In other words, meliach keroteach will be achieved, the level of Reticha will be achieved, that's the way it's understood. Without reading the Shach, without learning the Shach, simple words, it appears to be that Mechaber is going along with the Shita, the Ran and the Rashba, that, the Ran actually in this case, Rashba is something else. Going like the Ran, which is by the way, pretty much a De'ah Yachid, that Yachid, he's the only one that says that Meniach Keroteach does not begin right away. It will become Roteach after it has become a real Meliach. When is that? The 18 minutes went by. Doesn't start right away. Even Kovash doesn't happen right away. It happens over 24 hours. So why should Meliach happen right away? Who says? Tzir? Tzir is something else. Yeah, Tzir we'll talk about Tzir soon. Tzir, there's different things that happen that take longer or less, depending on what they are. So he holds like that, Shita, that it's only going to happen after it sat there for 18 minutes. Comes along the Ramah and says, no, Mapitom, Shach and Taz the same thing. We don't hold like that. Meliach, Keroteach, right away. It sat there for a couple of minutes, that's it, you're in trouble. B'dei Klipa, Shishim, whatever it is that you hold. Don't say it happened right away. Alright, but there appears to be differences in the Mechaber between what he says in Hilchas Melicha and what he says over here. And a little bit of differences on what he says in Hilchas Taaruvot. So in order to sort through all this out, we're going to go through the Shach, a little bit the Aruch HaShulchan, and Pri Megadim, as to what exactly is happening, because it does appear, if you look at this Mechaber, and then you go and look at a similar halacha in Hilchas Melicha, and a similar halacha in Hilchas Taaruvot, you say, wait a minute, the Mechaber is saying something completely different. Here he talks about something happening after 8. It does appear that in Hilchas Melicha and in Hilchas Taaruvot, it's happening almost right away. What's going on? So before we get to those who defend the Mechaber, or those that tell us that it's not a contradiction, let's talk about the Shach. The Shach wants to introduce a very interesting way of learning the Mechaber. It says the Mechaber here is not the same. It's not the same scenario as in Hilchas Melicha. What's Hilchas Melicha? Hilchas Melicha is about Melicha to draw out blood. Here we're not talking about that. Here we're not talking about drawing out blood. What are we talking about? We're talking about salting pieces of meat, salting cheese, salting meat for preserving. We're not talking about that. The Mechaber over there would agree with everybody that if you're drawing out blood, you have a problem right away, not after 18 minutes. Why? Because over there you have blood. And you have salt in the blood. You have the whole blood is roteach. The problem over there is the blood going into other pieces of meat.
But the Mikvaot, when the men are having to be involved in the dam, so
right.
That to get out the dam, so they doesn't have any to enter to the cheese.
Okay, so you want to say no. The Shach, you want to say something similar to the crazy placey. No. The Shach wants to say over there. In Hilchot Melicha, what you have here is a problem with the blood and the tzir, everything that's coming out. That is very, very hot. That's already salty, and it's hot from the very beginning. That is the concern over there. Hadaga Sham is the dam itself being nivla in other pieces, being absorbed in other pieces of meat. He says here we don't have that problem. Why? You know why the Mechaber says that it happens later on after 18 minutes? Here the Mechaber has no problem with blood. The blood has been already taken care of. Here this is called the Melicha Shniya. That's what, Ilan, that's what I'm explaining based on what your question was last time. What's this? It's really only the Shach. I didn't really get into too much that because it's only his way of learning it. First Melicha, second Melicha. I don't know there's a first and second unless I get into the Shach. And by the way, it's always good to learn everybody, whatever, Shach, Taz, if you have the chance to tour it yourself, of course. But it takes, we don't have the time to go through everyone. So, but now, since we're reviewing, I'll explain it a little bit more. Shach says, hey, there's stage 1 and stage 2. Here we're talking about a stage 2 Melicha. The first stage, take out the blood from the piece of meat. The housewife did that. The Rebbetzin did. She took care of that already. Right? In Isfahan, in Iran, all the women used to take care of, even the nikur, right? And so everybody, the women used to take care of that. So now we're talking about Melicha Shniya, second one. For what purpose? To preserve it. No refrigeration, so I need to preserve the meat. My father tells me that before there was refrigerators, in Yerushalayim, where he lived in the beginning, his mother used to put out food outside at night. That was the refrigerator. She didn't keep it indoors. She put it in the window.
Cats in their refrigerators.
In the what?
They had mice in the refrigerator. If that was the refrigerator, they were also...
Well, that doesn't seem to be a problem there. Maybe they weren't on the street level. But and it was enclosed in something. They couldn't get to it. Yeah.
The first they do wash and then they...
Yeah, in other words, sometime later, sometime after the first Melicha is done, they rinsed it. They rinsed it. It's all clean. Then they went ahead and did the second Melicha. Right. So the Shach says, listen, the Mechaber could also hold, like all of us, that on the first stage Melicha, it starts being roteach right away. Why? Because there's a problem with the dam. And that's why, if you see what he says there, he tells us that from the very beginning there appears... Now, the Shach doesn't tell you his words of the Mechaber. He doesn't quote it. Because then you would ask yourself, but that's not exactly what he says. But so he lets you investigate for yourself. Did the Mechaber really say that? And once you look at the words there, you ask yourself, wait a minute, the Shach, with all due respect, the Mechaber doesn't really mean that. And that's where the Pri Megadim gets involved. So before I tell you what the Pri Megadim says, the Shach says, the Mechaber can hold like us too, and therefore there won't be a contradiction to what he says there, that it begins to become roteach earlier on. Because that's one of the apparent contradictions. You know why? Because up there he's talking about the dam and the tzir. Dam and the tzir, which is the first stage Melicha. Dam and the tzir is a problem right away. It's dam. And it's hot already because it's mixed with salt. Okay. And by the way, it appears that the Mechaber would also say, he's not 100% sure on this, that once the salt has done its job in stage number 1, tashash kocho. In other words, it loses its strength. So in stage 1 Melicha, perhaps the Mechaber agrees with everybody. Or at the very least, he agrees that the roteach begins right away. If tashash kocho or not, it's not clear that the Mechaber says. It's not clear that the Mechaber says that the salt stops being roteach once the 18 minutes finished. But the Shach has a point. It does have a point. I mean, first of all, you know who the Shach was. Yeah? He says that Mechaber would agree perhaps that in Hilchot Melicha, dam is coming out, and because of the circumstances that you have blood, that's why it presents a problem even for the very beginning. It's salt, isn't it? But in Achiname, stage number 2, the Mechaber holds, and we can go along with that, the Shach says too. Stage number 2, when there's salt being applied not to draw out blood, then there's no blood. When will the salt become a roteach? Maybe after 18 minutes, yes. It takes time. But not there. There it happens almost right away. Here, you can take that. So, Shach says the Mechaber here is talking about a stage 2 Melicha. Let's call it, it was a Melicha that is not to draw out blood. Otherwise, that's the way he understands. No. And here the Mechaber, possibly. No, possibly, maybe. On Tashash Kocho, possibly. Nir'eh kacha. He says nir'eh, possibly. But here, there's no Tashash Kocho. For sure not. The second stage, the salt is being used to preserve, it won't stop. It's not doing anything, it's just being preserved. Okay. What's the difference between salting a piece of meat with enough salt just like you use it to draw out the blood, or salting it le'archa, to take it to the road? If you salt it so much like to take it to the road, then even if you rinse it, it's still very, very hot. You have to soak it to remove the hotness. Okay, these were words of the Mechaber himself. Okay, what did the Ramah hold? Ramah says, first of all, it's right away. And as far as after it did its job of drawing out blood, tashkash kocho. Even though he says himself that we're machmer, unless it's a hefsher meruba sudat mitzvah, we're machmer, that even that it continues to be a problem even after he drew out the blood. Nevertheless, that's the way he holds in principle, ekronit. Like the shita that holds that tashash kocho after 18 minutes. Now, where does he get that from? He says, I get that from Tosfot, from the Rosh. The Shach says, no, you didn't understand. They said tashash kocho only when it's drawing out blood, but there's no such a thing as tashash kocho if it's not drawing out blood. Because if you learn the Ramah is going to say, he's going to be makel here, it's going to be in principle, that the salt is weakened after it did its job, or even if it didn't do its job of drawing blood, I just salted a piece of meat. After 18 minutes, it's no longer strong. That's what understood from the Ramah. Ramah says stage 1, stage 2, it's the same for me. It begins right away. He holds like the Shitas that says it begins right away, and he interprets Tosfot and the Rosh to be saying that after 18 minutes went by, also tashash kocho. It's always tashash kocho after 18 minutes. And the Shah says, no, that's not the way you understand. He understood the Shah, the Tosfos and the Rosh, to say, no, tashash kocho is true. That even the Mechaber may even agree to that, but that's when, in Hilchos Melicha, when he drew out blood, after it finished drawing blood, it's tashash kocho, it's weakened. But not in the stage 2 kind of a situation where you're salting it to preserve it. There's no such thing as tashash kocho.
There's not there.
Right, nothing there.
Exhausted.
Right. So that's what the Shach is saying, and that's how he learns the Rosh and Tosfot different. There was a crazy placey that said, you know what the difference between stage 1 and stage 2 is? In the stage 1, the piece of meat is busy expelling its blood. It can't be roteach yet. Uasuk, upolet. It's not roteach. And Aruch HaShem says, I don't understand that. Dafka, because it's asuk upolet, it's already becoming roteach. So Aruch HaShulchan doesn't buy that. Right? So the crazy place was just trying to explain the sheet. Of course, the second shita, why does it become later and not before in stage number 1? In other words, why does it still take 18 minutes? Only because perhaps the Ran would hold over there. He's trying to explain the Ran, the crazy place. The Ran is the one that says it takes time. He says over there it's busy. It's busy. It's not rotach. And Aruch HaShulchan says, I don't understand that. Because it's busy, because it's doing what it's doing, it's already active. It's becoming rotach. That in itself produces retiv. All right. So anyway, Lemaaseh, we have therefore a shach that says that the Mechaber may agree with scenario, with dividing up the 2 stages, in other words, that they would be different. Or you can hold not like the shach, that the Mechaber seems to be holding like the Ran. Resicha begins after 18 minutes, not right away, right? And there's no tashash kocho, as long as the salt is there. It wasn't rinsed. Like those are his words. You didn't rinse it? It's a problem. But maybe he would agree that at least in the stage number 1, tashash kocho. But it appears to be that he would not necessarily agree that it right away becomes roteach, unless you learn like the Shach. What's the second way of learning? Well, we have a Pri Megadim. We do have valid questions on the Mechaber from Hilchos Melicha and Hilchos Taaruvot. That it appears to be that he wrote that even with other Isurim, like Nevelas and Treifas, it's Oser Miyad. All right, let's look at him. Let's see what he says real quickly. If I go to Hilchot Melicha, where does he say it? He says like this. We talk about an Isser that is together with Heter, right? They're sitting in Tzir. Imu kavush betoch tzir or betoch chometz, if they're both immersed, sitting in a container of brine or very strong vinegar, im shahak kedei sheitenenu ala or v'yartiach v'yatchil yitbashel hareu kimuvushal. If it was long enough for it to be put on the fire and to begin to boil, and what's that? 6 minutes. It's like it's cooked. So kavush kemevushal, not 24 hours in tzir. Less than that, it would be klipa. But if it sat that long, 6 minutes. Even that's not 18 minutes. It says 6 minutes. Okay, that's the shear. That's the shear. No, that's the shear that the poskim say is sheiteneno ala or v'yartiach. The average thing. Okay. Now let me ask you something. Is that a raya or a stira to what the Mechaber says over here? What do you get from that? He says, if the heter and the treif are together in tzir. What do you get from that? All I get from that is that, of course, the shear is less, but This is talking about isur shenishra im heter. We're talking about soaking, immersion in a container in liquid. Are we talking about Melicha here? This is not Melicha. Okay, now let's go to Hilchos Melicha. I'm going to go to Hilchos Melicha where the Shach is pointing, there's tiras, right? And therefore, that's why he wants to say stage 1 and stage 2, right? Stage 1, it's right away. You see from the Taaruvot, and okay, let me go to Melicha. Basar shenimlach bekli she'eno menukav. Let's say by mistake, the one who, she didn't know, she forgot, she didn't realize, and she took meat and she salted it in a container that is not perforated. What's going to happen? V'shahabo, and this meat is sitting in its own blood. How much? Keshiur shitnu mayim ala esh v'yatchilu liratach. Same like over there. It sat there enough amount of time like it would take for water to boil. Kol ma shemimenu batzir asur, whatever is in the tzir, in other words, in the brine, in the blood, is asur lechlo, afilu tzli, even you can't even roast it. V'chelek hachaticha shechutz latzir, the portion that is out of the tzir, en asur minu ela kedei klipa, because it's touching, right? The portion that's out is touching the portion that's in. The portion that's in is asur. The portion that's out, you only take a klipa out. Afilu miyesh bo shuman. All right. That's the raya of the shach that the mechaber holds that perhaps it's retiach right away. That is also an example of kovush. Salting in a non-perforated vessel means it will sit in its brine, and that's why it becomes usher completely. You can't even make tzli to it. So the Pri Megadim says, Siman Kuf Hein Siman Samachtes, we're talking about kovush, and Siman Tzadik Aleph, we're talking about Melicha. Very simple. The crazy place I noticed says something different completely. He says the mechaber. The crazy place is very interesting. He has some very creative ideas. I mean, he has tremendous chidushim. So he says, wait a minute. The mechaber here in Tzaddik Aleph is talking about Basar b'chalav. Basar b'chalav b'melicha is a Rabbanan problem. So he's being lenient over here. It takes 18 minutes. You have to wait until it's roteach. But over there, it's dam. It's doraita. In a sense, it's doraita. It depends on which blood it is, right? So, by the way, it's a machloket. They got the other dam. Which dam? So, you see what the crazy place says? Very interesting. Here we're talking about Basar b'chalav. It's a derabanan, Melicha. Basar b'chalav is only asa doraita b'bishur. Okay, over there it's dam, which is at least closer to doraita. But the Pri Megadim, I think, is very simple. Does everybody understand the Pri Megadim here? Pri Megadim says, well, how could you compare this to that? Now, what would the Shach say to that? I think the Shach does not hold of that Meliach has any koach in kavush. But that's not the reason. Anyway, I think that the Shach, obviously, he would have a problem with that, with it just plain din of kavush. He just seems to say that it's apparent that it starts right away, especially that a lot of Rishonim hold like that the reticha begins right away. So say that even the Mechaber agrees, but not necessarily. Not necessarily. The Mechaber possibly still holds like the Ran. Reticha does not happen right away. There's no such a thing as stage 1, stage 2. The only difference is that possibly you may say like the Shach that if you did go through stage 1, maybe later on the Melach was already Tashash Kocho. Maybe, possibly. It doesn't appear that he says that here. Unless you say that here he's not talking about Melicha and he's talking about Basar b'chalav, who knows? Okay, but I just wanted you to see the differences between the various shitot, why the Shach says what he says, right? And how the Pri Megadim learns it differently. He says because that's kavush, and here it's not kavush. You clearly see, in Hilchos Melicha it's sitting, and Hilchos Taaruvot it's sitting. Din kavush is a different din than din Melicha. And therefore, din Melicha possibly does require 18 minutes. I mean, these are all important halachas to bear in mind, because if a problem ever presents itself, we have who to rely on. That he says it's not roteach yet. Not yet. According to some, it takes 18 minutes, even though the majority of the poskim don't hold like that. But it could be, and there was cases, I didn't mention to you all the cases, there are cases recorded where trouble occurred in a big kitchen, in a big place, where they were cooking for a big party, where treif and heter were salted together. It turned out, however, that the treif had already been salted before to draw out its blood. Nobody knew it was treif, okay? It was already salted before, so what are we going to say? Oh, tashash kocho. Perhaps right now it no longer has any strength. There's nothing else that's going to come out from the treif onto the heter. Because it already released all its blood. It already released the tzir, the majority of it. So right now, even though they're being salted together again for whatever other reason, you see what I mean? It's not. So they have the poskim, the rabbis who were asked this, presented with this big question, say, "Whoa, wow, what are we going to do now?" Well, it depends if you hold a shash kocho or not, because according to the mechaber, it continues on, and according to some, it already started. You have all these things to consider. So you can definitely consider the fact that it had already been salted, so most of the dam is already out. So what do you? So it's treif. So what if it's treif? It's not going to affect anymore. At this point, it's not going to have any effect on the kosher meat.
Pots and things that were involved.
Yeah. The pots can be sometimes the asur kedei klipa. Yeah, not such a, and only that's the spot. We're going to, I think, learn it later on. Yeah, next evening. All right.
Salt is powerless gluten?
Yeah, just kedei klipa. All right.
But salt is in the food.
No, but that's not enough salt. Only the salt, only if you have a good amount of salt. We'll see it later on. That's one of the seifim. All right, so before we go on, we went into the chiluk, if there is one, of tatar gavar, which we're familiar already from Hilchos Taaruvot. Tatar gavar is another form of contact that may make a difference. Who's in the bottom and who's on top? Mechaber says very clearly, you know what? En chiluk. במליח עליון, תפל תחתון, למליח תחתון ותפל עליון. לעולם המליח מבליע בתפל ואינו בולע ממנו. The salted one will always affect the unsalted one, and not the other way around. How much can they clip at least? Oh no, now they gang up on him again, on the Mechaber. Oh, come on. In Hilchos Taaruvot, you said it makes a difference. You said, in Hilchos Taaruvot, in a situation of Melicha, you said that it makes a difference. Who says there is a difference? The Rashba. I think the Ran too. The hold that not just by sleep, not just by heat, but even by Melicha, you say tatar gavar. Everybody else says there is no such thing as tatar gavar. Melicha is always kedei klipa, unless of course you're machmer, shuman, non-shuman, kochush. Melicha is always klipa, so it doesn't make a difference if it's side by side, top to bottom, bottom to top. The salted one will affect the unsalted one, and not the other way around. So they look at the mechaber. Wait a minute, and it's true. Always the good thing to do is to look at his words. You know what's interesting? The Torah says, "B'tzetek tishpot amitecha." We're going to be reading it, learning it. Parshas Kedoshim. Judge your friend favorably. Judge him, give him the benefit of the doubt. Dan oto lechav zechut. Why? Because you may not have the opportunity to ask him, to interrogate him. What did you do? So we make assumptions, we theorize, and we may have the wrong conclusions. The best thing to always do is ask him, what did you mean? What did you intend? What did you actually do? By observation, I can't always tell. Looks, as they say, looks are deceiving. Well, observations can be deceiving too. If you can't ask, you don't want to ask, you're embarrassed to ask, give him the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps you saw him going into McDonald's. He's not going to eat there. He's going to the restroom. He's going to buy a drink, or he's going to make a phone call. Now, the problem that there is a marit ayin, that's a separate thing. A person should not sit down and eat there because that's a real marit ayin. But if somebody just sees somebody with a yarmulke going into McDonald's, there shouldn't be. He shouldn't think bad. He shouldn't go in to eat. But if he went in to make a phone call and he's not sitting down with everybody else, hopefully that is not a marit ayin. Should he go anyway? No, because the people are going to think all kinds of things. But if he has to go because he has to go to the restroom, he's allowed to. What he should not do is sit there. Now, in Disneyland, he can sit in the chairs with the restaurant outside the restaurant under the big umbrellas because people know you go to Disneyland, you bring your own brownie bags and you eat your own food. Now, you better not be eating the potato chips in the same red and white little containers because then they're going to say, oh, Kentucky fried chicken, what's that? So you definitely have to be careful with Maris Ayin. But otherwise, that's Maris Ayin. But on us is incumbent to judge positively, favorably, give him the benefit of the doubt. Although, because you're never going to ask him, you may not come to that. Okay, in the same way that is true with general judging your wife, your friend, anybody, giving you the benefit of the doubt. The Gemara says, even if you saw a Talmid Chacham committing a sin, it's black and white, it's a sin. Al teharher acharav. You saw him at night committing a sin, don't think too negatively of him, because lemochorat, in the morning, he already did tshuva. He already regretted it by that time. This is a real Talmid Chacham. Don't think negative, because by the time next morning, he's already cleaned up his act. Here too, you see a question. Oh, Stira the Rambam, everybody likes to gang up. These are Rishonim. Even the Mechaber. I mean, everything is Ruach HaKodesh. There are no real mistakes, unless it's a mistake in the what do you call it, in the press. Or it's unclear, which could be some places it's not as clear as others. Look at, you always, like giving him the benefit of the doubt, look at his words. Alright, what are his words? That if it's fat, the Mechaber also agrees with the Shita of Shomen, that if one of them is fat, it goes up to Shishim. Oh, Mishum the Tatar Gova, we talk about Melicha. If the heter tofel, unsalted is the bottom, the iso is the salted one is on top, ain't no people. Wait a minute. Here there is a Tatar Gover, and here's Melicha. Good question. But here he's talking about Shuman. As the Meforshim explain, that as the Meforshim explain, to answer something b'shishim because of the Shuman, we're saying is that the Shuman is mefapea, it travels. That can only be in Melicha. That can only be, it's in Sli too. It can only be in Melicha if it's Tatar Gover. If it's at the bottom. If it's at the bottom, there's Shuman involved, Melicha, yes, Tatar Gover. If it's on top, it's Shuman, it won't affect the bottom. Why? Because the bottom will be Tatar Gover. Huh? Kedei Klipa, yes. But not Kedei Shishim. So is this a steer to the Mechaber? No, the Mechaber is talking about Shuman over there. Regarding the case of Shuman that goes till Shishim, I have a condition for that. I will only agree that Melicha makes a problem of Ad Kedei Shishim by Shuman if it's in the bottom, not side by side, not the other way around. So therefore, what he's going to tell us right now, which we'll see next week, when did we say that it's Kedei Klipa only if it's Kochush, not that if it's Shmeina, right? But if it's Shmeina Kula Asura, when? I understand. The problem is the Mechaber doesn't tell us Kula Asura if it's the Tatar Gover. You see? You have to go to Hilchas Aruvas and complete the halacha that what he's saying here, Kula Asura, is on condition, like he says in Hilchas Aruvas, that it's in the bottom. I'm not saying that it's always like that. Also, there's fine details, and we're going to see a very fascinating fine detail that I always had a difficulty understanding, and that's why I asked you to look into it. It's not clear, by the way. No matter who you look at, unless you look at the Orcha Shulchan, there's a fine detail in the Mechaber that is not 100% clear. We're going to go through it, and I'll tell you that in a moment. It's a little bit difficult to understand, and you'll see why. So anyway, real quickly, just through the Tatar Gover issue. So what's Tatar Gover? Tatar Gover says the bottom one is stronger than the top one. So the Meforshim explain why isn't the Tatar Gover by Melicha? Because Tatar Gover is physics that works with heat. How? Something that is hot at the bottom has the ability to overpower the top. And the other way around. If there's heat involved, the one that's in the bottom that's cold has the power to cool the one that's on top. That works with heat. In Melicha, the salted one is always going to impact the unsalted one. Tatar Gover does not help. Tatar Gover does not help to say what? Yeah.
You just have heat.
Yes.
What does the bottom one be not yet solid for? And the top one being yet solid or above?
Right.
What does that have to do with heat?
So we said we gave different explanations in the past that the heat rises.
No. I'm saying that the bottom one, the heat rises. If the bottom one is 2 degrees lower than yet solid, and the top one is 1 degree over.
No. We said we're talking about Yat Soleded.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
So let's say the bottom one is 2 degrees below Yat Soleded.
Right.
So it's cold.
It's colder, right.
Yeah.
Therefore, it will have the koach to cool off the top because of the fact of sitting at the bottom.
What is happening?
Because of the position that it's in. The one that's on top is...
No, I'm just asking, what does it have to do with this? That's my question.
No, what I meant to say was that when it comes to heat, I call it the physics of heat, when it comes to the condition where items are either hot and cold, then we have that particular halacha that tells us that the one that's at the bottom can either heat up the one that's on top, or the one that's in the bottom can cool off the hot one on top. When we're talking about hot and cold, in Tatar Govar, the one that's in the bottom, if it's tofel, the one that's on top cannot draw out, or I should say the other way around. The one that's at the bottom, that's tofel, cannot cool off the meluach one, because what's necessary to cool off the meluach is a dacha. How do you cool off a salty something? It requires water. Heat and cold does not require water necessarily. Even one that's cold at the bottom has some koach that can affect the heat. That's, I think the Gro brings the smak and explains that chiluk. The tall gover with heat and cold it could work, but with Melicha, the one that's in the bottom does not have the power to undo the one that's on top that's Meliach, because you require hadacha. The same way, the one that's Maluach also on top cannot make the bottom one too salty either. In other words, to take out whatever it has, if the one that's on top is the heter, and the one at the bottom is the isser, it does not have so much koach to draw from the isser into itself. Right? Or even if it's not on top, anywhere, it does not have that koach, it only has the koach to be mavliya into the other one, not to be, because to be able to draw from the other one has to be salty enough. And when the one that's salty touches the unsalty one, a little bit of salt comes onto it. Not enough to draw out whatever may be in there. The salty one has the ability to put in, but upon contact, there is not enough salt going there to be able to draw out. Okay? So heat and cold works differently than Melicha. That's the way they explain it. Yeah.
Is the Rabbanan, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a cooking dough, right?
Right, that's right. But Basar בחלב, yeah.
So if we hear about of Tatar Gavar, Rabbanan, who made this analogy between something salty and something that's hot,
right,
did not have to go as far as involving Tatar Gavar in there. That would be sufficient? No.
The what?
Well, Rabbanan could say, listen, we're saying that Maluach Karotea, with respect to Basar B'chal, does not involve any laws of Tatar Gavar. We define what Maluach Karotea.
Yeah, but sometimes it's a mitziut too.
Yeah, so that's the question, is it a mitziut?
That's what they say. They say it's a mitziut. The way they grow. The grow brings the smak.
Yeah,
that's the mitziut, the difference between heat.
That's the way he wants to make plausible.
Right.
But is that really the basis of the halacha?
That's the way he explains it. What?
No, I'm raising a question as to when the Gra said something, is that what constitutes the halacha? Or is it a way of making the halacha plausible? Just because he said it doesn't mean that he's telling you that this is the reason that the halacha exists. He can make a comment about a halacha without intending to tell you what the basis of the halacha is.
Yeah, all right. Anyway, obviously, one could look further into that to see exactly what the chiluk is. There may be other opinions. All right, so now that we understood the basic halachas of the first part of Sif Hey, towards the end of this portion, the Mechaber says, Hilkach, Basar Gvina Meluchim, we're back to Basar B'chalav, if they're both Shach, you have to do both. Why? Because it's Basar B'chalav. It's not treif and kosher, that only one will be a problem, not the other one. Basar B'chalav, each one is going to be affected, they're both salty, right? Because they're both heter, and they both become aser from each other. So you're going to have to make klipa. Take klipa, but if one of them is salted, not the other one, hamaluach mutar be'adocha, ve'atofa tzarich klipa. The maluach won't need anything, just adacha, because it can only give off. It does not absorb. So, now, quickly to the Ramah. We said that the Ramah just says that every Melicha requires shishim, like we saw in Hilchas Taaruvot. V'hod Torah maluach v'tomet tofel shori. why is the Toher Maluach and Tome Tofel Shori, even though the Ran is the one that's going to say no, that even Toher Maluach is salty and the Tome is Tofel, it still draws out a little bit of he's the only one that said that. Even the Tofel, the Tome is Tofel, it draws out a little bit, but we hold that not. How the Toher Maluach and Tome Tofel Shori, Haino, now he qualifies that. Shatome Yovish. Only if the Tome is completely dry. But im hu dover tzolol, if the thing that is Tome, or the one that's causing a problem, is tzolol, is liquid, nesar atohor. The Torah also becomes nesar, me'acha she'eno nechal machmas, it's so salty, boleh ha'isu she'etzloi, u'shneim asurim. Shneim? What do you mean shneim? You just said Tome and Torah. Who cares about the Tome? Shneim, right now he's going back to Basar b'chalav. So if you had salty meat falling into milk, okay, so here it's milk, it's not cheese, right? Even though the meat is the salty one, but this is not dry, it's not cheese. The salty meat will absorb some of the milk, and of course the milk will absorb some of the meat. That's for sure. Shnehem asurim in basar b'chalav. V'dafka, he says, shatorah lachtzat, as long as the Torah has to be a little bit humid, if it's completely dry, so it will not be able to absorb anything if it's completely dry. And this is where the trouble begins a little bit here. What does he exactly mean by completely dry? The Shach brings down the Torah's chatas. It says, what about Kosa b'Torah's chatas? What about the other way around? Let's see here. What if the milk is the one that's salty and not the meat? You hear the other way around. The meat is yovesh, tofel, and the milk is salty. In that case, it appears to be that the meat will not absorb from salty milk. So he asks questions on that. He leaves it in the tzorechiyun. Why should it be any different? Especially that the Ran holds always that even if one of them is tofel, still there's some contact, and the Meliach can absorb from the tofel too. So they want to be machmir in such a situation. Even though the Torah's Chatas appears to say that if the liquid was a salty one, we're talking about not tome liquid, milk, then the meat would be okay. So the Shach has a tzorech in that. Why would it be any different? Especially if you consider the Ran. Okay, so some are machmir in that case. Now, we were introduced to Yovesh, comes along the Mechaber, listen Ilan, let's see how you understand the Mechaber. Comes along the Mechaber, we learned so much so far in Sifei. Ve'im hem yeveshim, if everything is dry, afilu hem meluchim, even if everything is salty, both. Or lachim, or they're a little bit wet, and they're not wet because of the Melicha, it's enough just to rinse them. Wow. What does that mean? Ilan, what does that mean? How do you understand this? We just spoke about what Melicha does. Here he's telling us everything is Meluach, the Basar and the Challah, the Basar and the Gvina, I should say. All of a sudden he tells us, all that I have told you is on condition that they're not completely dry. Im hem yeveshim, afilum hem meluchim, even though they're salty or lachim, they're not completely dry, they're a little bit wet, but it's not wetness because of the melicha. Sagi v'yadacha, you don't need klipa, you don't have to go your way. Wow, big chiddush. Not everybody explains this point very, very clearly. What does this yovish really mean? I couldn't understand why they don't explain it. What?
They have the koach influence to the order, but yavish don't have the power.
Obviously. No, that's pashut. That's pashut. But before you get to this line, when you learn Mechaber, you say, okay, meliach keroteach, nice. Mavliya and not maflit from it. Good. Salt is taking out all this blood. Great. 18 minutes, not 18 minutes. Tashash kocho, not tashash kocho. If you salt it a lot, for sure not tashash kocho. Be'im hem yeveshim, afilu hem meluchim, or lachim, v'lo sagi v'adacha. But what happened to all the koch of the salt? So they explain that here we're talking about that in a situation where the meat is completely dried up, where there's no tzir even left inside. In other words, that the salt, the original stage 1 salt, has already completely taken out everything that was in there, right? And that same salt is still sitting there, supposedly, okay? Or even if it's another salt, but it's completely yavish. In other words, it's completely, there's a word in English called desiccated. There's a word to describe something that is, yes, I think that's the word. D-E-S-I-C-A, right? I think that's the word, yeah. Have you heard of that?
Nope. No, I don't have
Completely dried out, then it has, like we were saying, it doesn't have anything. What doesn't it have? It doesn't have any lachluchis. And what's this lachluchis to have to do with anything? So they explain that meliach keroteach only works fully when it has lachluchis. Because it's the lachluchis that is causing the tam to be nivla into that. But if there's no lachluchit at all, then what's going to come out? If it's completely dry. Even if it's a little wet, but it's not machmas melicha. Machmas melicha what? Yeah, because if it's machmas melicha, that means there's still something coming out. So as long as something is coming out, it will present a problem. If something is no longer coming out because it's completely yavish, you sagi behadocha. Interesting. I wish somebody would explain it a little bit more. Why?
So if I understand you correctly, what you're saying is...
You won't find it. Look at any sefer you want, kimat. No, this is a very important point. You're telling me how much the koach of Melicha here is, and all of a sudden you stop me. Yeah, but ignore all of that. If everything is dry, we don't have a problem. What do you mean dry? What does dry mean? What does dry mean?
I'm not saying if it's dry. I'm saying if it's dry.
What is he saying?
If it's dry or if its moisture is not the result of the milk.
Right.
So he's giving
that too.
Two.
He's
so
giving us two. Right.
It being dry is identical.
Yeah.
It's moisture being a result of Melicha. So I don't think, I think it makes, I thought that's what you meant.
No, of course that's the meaning of it, but nobody tells me that this does away with all the koach of the melach that we were talking about before,
No,
that the melach
doesn't.
continues.
No, it doesn't. I thought that's what you meant. What does heat accomplish? Remember that we're comparing salt here to...
No.
What does heat accomplish? Heat accomplishes that the taste travels from one to the other.
Okay. Right.
If it's cold, it doesn't travel.
Right.
Now, if the salt is not accomplishing a transfer of taste from one to the other, then the salt is not fulfilling the function of heat.
You've said it. That's exactly it. That's exactly it. In other words, in other words, yes. In other words, but you have to explain it that way. That even though you have all this salt, it's like tsoinen, the Meforshim say, the few that I found. It's like tsoinen, it's like cold. You can have all the salt you want, but if there's no lachluchit, so there's nothing. So you said it very nicely. Thank you. Okay, so the last Ramah here is about tzir. Kol tzir mi basar shenimlach, afilu lo nimlach rak letzli, chashuv teach. He says, forget about the blood, forget about salt and tam of basar. If it's the brine coming out from the meat that was being salty, even it's only salty a little bit, letzli, chashuv teach, that brine, that tzir that's coming out, is always going to be roteach. Even if it wasn't salty, anything that has come out of that meat, forget about the meat itself now, that which has come out of the meat, according to the Ramah, even if it was only nimlach litzli, it's already called roteach. Velachein, im noflot tzir al gvina, if some of that tzir fell on cheese, or al kli, even on a kli, it's oyser. Afilu mokav she'ena basar oyser, even in a place where the basar would not be oyser, the lo nechshav roteach, because it's not roteach for whatever reason. Mikol mokom matzir. And that's how most Meforshim, or most poskim hold. Tzir will always choshev eno nechal machmas molchoi. Tzir is tzir. It's not the basar. The basar may have the koach to emit more. It's toshash koicha or whatever. But tzir that came out, that tzir is sitting somewhere, that tzir is powerful. The tzir shel basar she oiser. That tzir which is prohibited. In other words, that can't prohibit. Shenofal ala kli. What do you do to that kli? Tzarech hagala. You're going to need to make hagala. V'imu kli cheres, if it's earthenware, tzarech shvira. You need to break it. You have no choice. V'im lo nofar rak ala mokom echad. If you know it only fell on one spot, the kli eitz. If it's wood, v'chayotze bo koilef mekom v'daya. Then of course, if it's a small spot, you can peel it off. But if you don't know it fell and it's not eitz, you're going to require hagala. So what we see from this is that tzir obviously is definitely more powerful than the melech on the basar itself that only goes kedei klipa after a shear of zman, perhaps, according to the sheet. But according to this way, in other words, this method involving the tzir itself, which came out of the basar, there may be more posting that would hold that it's a problem, it presents a problem even right away, even if it fell in the Kedera. The tzir is not the basar anymore. The tzir is the actual brine, the actual liquid, that even if it's cold, it's already roiseah because of the nature of the chemistry of it. So therefore, even if it's a little bit of salt, that does not matter that there was a little bit of salt. What matters here is a little bit came out. That little bit that came out, you better be careful with it, that it should not fall on the keli, or that it, of course, should not fall on cheese, because that would answer pretty much almost right away. Okay, this is what we'll stop.